Sucky supports Bowden blunders and thermistors you have to remove with drill bits. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 84. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here and you're dealing with some print failures, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed. Remember, you can submit your own print failures for me to look at and do my best at fixing. You can slide into those DMs on all the social medias. You can tag us, use the hashtag PrintFix as well, or email me directly, youtube@3dmusketeers.com. We like this kind of thing. We like helping people fix some failures, and we got some great ones for you today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this segue to our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. If you are tired of dealing with print fails, we know it sucks. We've been there. Believe me, it happens to all of us. We here at 3D Musketeers can help you fail a little bit less with your 3D printer. Whether that is one-on-one training to get your machine running in tip-top shape, or you just want to simply outsource your 3D printing to experts, we got you covered here at 3D Musketeers. With over 40 years of combined experience and over 4 dozen 3D printers, we can help you make awesome every single day of the week. We also now offer high-end 3D scanning services, where recently I traveled to Austin, Texas to work with the US women's soccer team. We actually did a video on it. We'll link to it in the description down below. A little bit of a different one, but it's a travel vlog. If you're watching the segue, you probably would enjoy the travel vlog. But we do offer that with our Artec 3D scanners to take physical things and make them digital so that you can 3D print them or use them in an AR, VR, digital twin, or whatever atmosphere you do so desire. But if you do want to support us financially, and you're not really looking to outsource anything at the moment, you can kick us a couple of bucks into that creator fund via YouTube channel memberships, Patreon, and now PayPal for as little as $1 a month. And at the $10 tier and higher, you actually get to come and hang out with myself, the entire 3D Musketeers team, and the other Musketeers of our Patreon Discord, where we have a lot of fun. In fact, we're streaming me filming this live. I can't hear them, but they can hear me, and they're probably laughing at me. I've really enjoyed it. We've got a great group of people there, so come over, hang out. There's always people awake, hanging out, ready to make awesome. But enough of me talking. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, things you're supposed to do. Let's get back into fixing some fails. First up, a fail from my buddy Simone Fontana, who is dealing with some issues with their Bowden tube. For those of you that don't know, Bowden tube, or the PTFE tubing on your 3D printers, is actually a consumable. And we can see here that they've got a Prusa Mini that the Bowden tube has completely worn through. This is why it's good to keep Bowden tube in stock at all times. Whether you choose to use the cheap white stuff, or you're gonna do what they did here and get yourself some premium Capricorn tubing, it's good to have spares. With that being said, this is not something that happens very quickly. So if you do see this happening often on your printer, you're either printing with abrasives, and if you are printing with abrasives, please don't be using Bowden tubes. It's just easier to do it without Bowden tubes. But if it isn't abrasives and it is happening more often, check to see how much pressure that you have on your extruder, because chances are you have too much extruder pressure and not enough pressure at your hot end itself, and you're building up some extra tension inside of that Bowden tube, creating the wear that you see. If your extruder is dealing with that issue where you do have too much extruder pressure, you can easily dial it back. If you do have a machine like an Ender 3 where it just always has too much extruder pressure, then just put a better extruder on your machine. Now, while that does cost some cash, it's gonna save you the extra time and effort in the long run. Now, you might say, Grant, replacing a Bowden tube is no big deal. And you're right. Most of the time, it isn't. But if you're doing it a couple of times a month, that starts to become a bit of a problem when you look at your time investment. We've actually talked about this a lot on our podcast, which if you don't come and hang out on, you absolutely should. We stream basically live almost every single weekend, because this is actually an off weekend for us. I'm actually currently in travel to the Rocky Mountain Rep Rap Fest as you guys are watching this video, with the Better Three Quarters, of course, where we are going to be bringing you coverage of the festival. And we were going to try to do a stream, but it's just not worth the effort for it to potentially fail. So we decided we're going to take an off week this week from the podcast, so join us next weekend where we talk all about the Rocky Mountain Rep Rap Fest and what it was like to be there and seeing all the people and some of the cool stuff that we did see that maybe didn't get a ton of talk in the video itself. But we do talk a lot about the business side of 3D printing and making for money, if you will, so that you do look at this as more of, oh, it's just a 30-cent piece and 20 minutes of my time, to, wait a minute, for $100, I can just solve this problem 100% outright and never deal with it again. There's value to that. Now, with what they're dealing with, it's a Prusa Mini, so going to direct drive is not as easy as you may think. And in fact, I'm not aware of an easy way to make a Prusa Mini direct drive. And even further exacerbating this problem, the Prusa Mini uses non-standard couplers for the Bowden tube. So a lot of us are used to those push-to-connect fittings. On the Prusa Mini, it is these brass compression fittings that if you over-tighten, actually make it wear faster. So be very careful about that. It's why we recommend putting an E3D Revo Micro on the Mini and just upgrading to a regular style Bowden tube that doesn't use those dumb brass connectors, because I'm sorry, Prusa, I disagree with that. And while it might make more sense from a factory standpoint, from a usability and user standpoint, that is a huge point of failure for a lot of users that deal with extrusion issues inside of their Prusa Minis. So if you are dealing with that on your Bowden printer, again, keep some extra Bowden tube in stock, replace it as necessary. We'll link to some in that description so you guys can take a look at it if you do want to do such a thing. How can I improve my support or maybe bridging? Bottom side was printed with tree supports and it looks bad versus the top side. We've got some things that we have to deal with here. The first thing, tree support is not great for doing flat surfaces like you see here. And generally, the underside of your supported material is always going to look worse than the top side that is clean. With a part like this, you would absolutely want to just cut off those little nubbins or pieces there. This appears to be for a prop blaster. I could be wrong. It appears to be some sort of fake trigger. I don't know. I'm sure I'll get corrected in the comments. If you know what it is, let me know. But this would be much better done for a snug support or a grid style support. Another option that you have is to cut the model in half. Not this way, of course, although that might actually work. We want to actually cut it lengthwise so you have two mirrored halves that'll have a nice flat surface that you can print and then go ahead and glue together. Then you'll only have one little seam that you'll have to clean up and deal with. Now, if you are the type of person that says, no, I don't want to cut it up, for this particular part, I would orient what is the top in this photo to be the bottom of the part. You would need to do some supporting on this trigger here, as well as some of the flanged areas, and of course these little dowel pins as well. That will be considerably less support than what we're currently looking at. Tree support is great for organic models. In fact, recently we did this model from World of Warships on our Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon, and you can see the tree support in there is great for this, even down to getting the detail in his hand and finger. That's actually really important for a model like this, because if his finger was broken, it's not as much fun anymore. You know, captain of bad decisions and such. I like him. He sits on my computer and he's not going anywhere. I like him. But in this particular case, you do want to make sure that you're better keeping an eye on what is necessary and best printing orientations. If you don't want to have any seam lines or bond lines in your part, then yeah, you do kind of have to be a little bit careful of how you orient things and how you support it. But if you are okay with splitting it up, we do recommend some of the sticky stuff, some 3D Gloop. They don't pay me to say this, but maybe they should. I'm going to ask Gloop if we can get a coupon code, and if we can, I'll link to one in the description. If not, I'm just going to link directly to Gloop's website. But get yourself some 3D Gloop. It's good stuff. I really like it. It's methylene chloride based, so be careful with it, but it is a chemical adhesive. So when you glue parts together with 3D Gloop, they don't come apart, ever. You'll break the printed part before you break the bond that the Gloop has. I love these little nano bottles. They're awesome, and they dry out considerably slower than some of the larger bottles. Highly recommended, relatively affordable. Go get yourself some Gloop if you are into the cosplay world. If you are looking to fill those seams, let me know if you want me to do a video on that. I'm not the best at finishing parts like this, but it is often that we have to do it for clients. In fact, we just had to do one for a client a couple of weeks ago that I rode the struggle bus a little bit on, but we end up getting it solved. We will show you guys those prints and the failure associated with it when we can talk about it, and the NDA for the project is up. So if you do like that kind of thing where we talk about making some parts for a really, really big sports team here in Tampa, make sure to get subscribed, because that is coming soon. TM. When we look at filling seams, I do often use a mixture of UV resin and cornstarch to make it more like a Bondo, but understand it doesn't always stick to material, so do your testing first. And remember, resin is toxic. You know we gotta mention that. So again, I would look at reorienting, look at potentially splitting, but this orientation that you are currently printing it in is not correct. And if you don't look at fixing that, I really don't think that dialing in your supports is going to do anything for you unless you have a printer that is either IDEX or something like a Bamboo with an AMS or a Prusa with the MMU, where you can do dissimilar interface material, but that is way more complicated than you think and will likely result in poor layer adhesion from not having your purge volume set correctly. So we will talk about that eventually. I'm still tuning it in myself, but we're getting pretty far on this, and I'm excited for what is possible with some of these mixing hot ends, and even further what happens when we start looking at tool changers. Unexpected bridges inside of a print. Simple Cylinder has odd bridges inside when printed, even though these bridges are not present in the G-code. So we've got a thread. This is a bottle, and we've got lines here, and of course it's white filament, so it's really tough to see things, but we've got lines here that didn't connect. What this is caused from is the material being cooled too quickly, or in some cases, not quickly enough. I know, it's very simple and easy to understand, but in this case, it is layer adhesion related. Now, I don't know what you're printing it on. Let's see if we can get some knowledge base here. They are at 200 without any issues, but there have been some issues in the past, and they ended up being able to decrease the wall speed and increase the temperature. Turns out 235 degrees does wonders with PLA. I mean, that depends on a lot of things. So it's an Ender 3 V2, Cura 5, PLA Plus, speed of 50, mostly vanilla settings with a higher support overhang angle, 58 degrees. They designed this piece specifically to be printed without supports. 200 and PLA Plus should not result in this. And if you do have some internal thread geometry, which it looks like you might have, that is all because of the overhang is not properly bonding to the layer either below it or off to the side of it. Increasing your temperature will cause this problem to go away because the material is not going to solidify as quickly, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. 58 degrees is a big overhang, and while it's not impossible with an Ender, it is not possible all the way around on a part because a stock Ender 3 only has cooling from one direction. And no, not Harry Styles' side, although this part at 235 might end up looking a little hairy by the time they're all said and done. It is going to string at those temperatures, especially if you're printing more than one. But looking at this, if you only have air blowing from one side, which I would bet is going to be this side, the rest of it isn't going to stick very well. And when it does eventually cool, PLA tends to shrink a little bit. Not as bad as ABS or ASA, mind you, but that shrinkage will result in what looks like really interesting bridging where it doesn't actually belong. When you are looking at building threads for a product like this, we highly recommend building threads specific for 3D printing. And if you're wondering what good threads look like for 3D printing, I highly recommend looking at what Clockspring does. This is a jar that Clockspring made. In fact, it's made in 2 pieces, all print in place, no support, and all the gears still move. But we can see here that we've got a thread pattern that goes in, screws down tight, and it's now on there for good. And this is all printed in situ. Now, these 2 pieces are done separately, but all of these gears and everything all printed in place without any issues whatsoever. I would recommend looking at Clockspring and the work that Sven does to really understand better how to do your threads. It is possible to design them out in something like Fusion 360, but you want to be more careful with it so you don't end up over-engineering for threads, because when you do look at mass production and especially injection molding, common threads that we're used to being able to 3D print are not injection moldable because they often include something called an undercut, which if you guys want to learn more about the specifics for injection molding design, let me know. We can bring on a really awesome engineer buddy of mine to talk about it in a future podcast. So let me know in those comments. Be great to know. Next up, a fail from our Patreon Discord. This is Mr. Chris Catlett, who is apparently had a couple of issues with his Sovol SV06 Plus. Now, I do have one, and we're going to be unboxing it in the next week or 2. So let me know. We also have a Flying Bear Reborn too. Let me know in what order you guys want to see those done, because we're going to do unboxing live streams for both of them. Are we going to do the Sovol first, or is that Flying Bear going to be done first? Let me know in those comments. But Chris had a Blob of Doom, and we would normally talk about Blob of Dooms, but it's been a commonality that we've talked about here. So if you want to see a Blob of Doom and to learn more about it, we actually talked about it in last week's episode. I'll card to it so you guys can take a look, and of course link to it in that description down below. Chris dealt with a Blob of Doom that got past his silicone sock and completely encapsulated his hot end. In fact, we can still see some of the plastic schmoo up at the top of that not Kano. Sovol, because they don't immediately just rip off E3D, don't use the standard cartridge style thermistor. This is a half-length cartridge thermistor. And in fact, Mr. Catlett ended up using a drill bit to get it out. You can see it's considerably shorter than you would expect. I said, well, why don't you just push it through? Normally, thermistors in volcano-style hot ends are with a through hole. So you just heat up the hot end with a torch, you use an Allen key, and you push it out the end. No big deal. Well, no, these are blind holes, and a blind hole is a hole that does not go all the way through, and a through hole, as the name would state, goes all the way through. This being a blind hole means if you do have your wires end up breaking like this, you have yourself a bad time. And in fact, it is better to try to remove it when the printer is cold. What Chris did is he just drove a drill bit into it till it grabbed it, then heated up the printer with a torch or a lighter of some sort, and then was able to pull it out. So the plastic was a little bit molten around that thermistor. Oftentimes the thermistor will get welded in place by the plastic that is now attached and strewn across your hot end, and it does proper suck. I've been there before, and it's why we recommend to keep spares on hand. But in this particular case, and what I'm going to do with our Sovol SV06 Plus, I am not going to run the not Kano. I am not going to run their nozzle. We are going to be upgrading it immediately to a regular volcano block from E3D, a proper cartridge thermistor, proper E3D heater, as well as a diamond nozzle, who, while not sponsoring this video, is an awesome company. We'll link to them in the description, and you can get your nozzles made of diamonds, which we've covered more than enough times. Card to the playlist so you guys can take a look at that if you do so want. But looking at this problem, I feel for Chris, because I told him to try to push it through. So what did he do? He pushed it deeper and made it basically impossible to get with pliers. So really, the drill bit was the only option. Thankfully, it's not that big of a deal if you can do it with a drill bit, but if you can't get it with a drill bit, yeah, you kind of got to replace the whole damn block. Now, if you wanted to, you could now just drill a hole all the way through, but these blocks use this hole right here as a means to hold in the thermistor with a bolt and washer, which I hate that style. It's terrible. I don't know why companies do it this way, but I prefer holding it in with a set screw that you just tighten till it's barely touching and everything is good. And what we can see though is Chris got his machine back up and running and everything looks beautiful. And in fact, that is a really pristine first layer on that Sovol SV06 Plus. And for those that don't know, Chris is a master of resin printing and has a Jupiter among many other machines and does amazing work for resin. This is his first entry into FDM printing. And while I do feel his pain, I do get to say, sucks being a noob, doesn't it, homie? We're good friends and we like to rag on each other like that. And if you do want to come hang out with the rest of us. In fact, there's quite a few people watching me film this live in our Discord right now. So if you want to, be exposed to that kind of debauchery, go join our Patreon, YouTube channel members, or PayPal at the $10 tier and higher. Links, of course, in that description down below. What the heck is happening all of a sudden? We've got a Benchy here that looks proper messed up. And they say my prints have become really bad. I'm not sure what is happening, and since my prints were okay yesterday, these streaks are mostly on the posterior end. The front isn't great, but much better than the back. Any ideas? Well, if your posterior doesn't look good, I recommend squats. That's normally a good way to start. But there are some other things. This is a cooling issue. I'm just trying to see if we've got that right there. Third comment, insufficient cooling. I would bet that we just have a cooling fan that either isn't working or the duct is broken. I'm not exactly certain which of these are because we only have a couple of photos, but this is absolutely insufficient cooling. Remember when we talked about the threads having an issue where they wouldn't stick to the bridging? This is what happens on a much broader scale when you do try to turn up your temperatures and you try to turn up your speeds without giving better cooling. Ender 3 V2s only have so much when it comes to cooling. They run out very quickly. And really above 50 millimeters a second, you're going to run out of cooling on a stock Ender 3 V2. Now below that, they do okay. They're not going to do amazing benchies, and they're certainly not going to win any races or beauty contests, but it's good enough for government work. In this case, it's likely time just to look at a brand new cooling solution. I prefer a 5015 blower cooling solution, and there are tons of them out there, like the Hero Me. We actually talked with Andy from Hero Me. We'll card to that video so you guys can take a look. It's a podcast where we talked all about the history of Hero Me and what it is about, and it is a massive cooling solution for really an Ender-based style of 3D printer, while it is a little heavy, it is pretty much the best for cooling out there right now without going crazy and upgrading parts all over the world. Because at some point, you do run into a Ship of Theseus problem with Enders, where you start replacing all these parts, one after another, after another, after another, and at what point is it just not an Ender 3 anymore? That's really all that I have for you guys today on this one. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones, and if you are at the Rocky Mountain Rep Festival, come and say hi, just when I'm not filming. Get a photo or something. We'll include them in next week's PrintFix Friday or something if we remember. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Okay, moving on to Catlet, who is listening live, but I can't hear him, which means I can call him a stinky, smelly poo-poo face. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank yous out to all of our PayPal, Patreon, and YouTube channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier. And remember, you can join and support us for as little as $1 a month to make these videos even better and be able to afford trips like the Rocky Mountain Rep Festival, which I haven't mentioned I'm at. Come find me, come say hi. It's going to be great. The 22nd and 23rd of April, 2023. Right below me will be the entire PrintFix Friday series, where you can look at print failures and how to fix them, and a couple of joke ones in there as well. And right next to that will be our series on printer maintenance and getting those first layers looking right. Take a look at that playlist. I think you guys will enjoy it, but I will see you down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.